Okay, I could ask those leaving the public gallery to do so as quickly and as quietly as possible as we resume business. The next item of business is a members' business debate on motion 16536 in the name of Marie McNair on impact of UK welfare reforms in Scotland. The debate will be concluded without any questions being put. I'd invite members wishing to participate to press the request to speak buttons. I'd make a further plea to those leaving the public gallery to please do so as quietly as possible, and invite Marie McNair to open the debate around 7 minutes. Ms McNair.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm pleased to have secured this debate to discuss the impact of UK welfare cuts, and I thank all the members who have supported my motion. Can I also thank Age Scotland for the briefing they have provided? Presiding Officer, this debate comes at a very important time. Instead of a change of direction, we have a government at Westminster that seems intent on making disabled people and children and pensioners the victims of austerity. The biggest lie of any election campaign is the one that stated, "Read my lips, no more austerity." The Labour Government have declared their intention to proceed with the cruel and inhumane welfare cuts proposed by the previous Tory Government. These are cuts that the respected disability charity Scope has described as catastrophic. They quote Naomi, who states, "I feel abandoned by the government. It feels like they don't see disabled people's needs as important. I don't think they care, and it makes me feel insignificant." Scope call instead for Labour to invest in an equal future for disabled people and not increase poverty by cutting benefits. But instead, Labour plan to proceed. Presiding Officer, I'll only take it if I get time back, because I'm really tight for time.
You get time back. Paul O'Kane.
I wonder if Marie McNair would accept that part of the importance of dignity for disabled people is ensuring that disabled people who want to get access to work can. I mean, does she accept that simple premise?
Marie McNair.
I do. Of course I do, and I thank the member for intervention. And as I say, I really thought you'd be standing up to apologise for how your party are treating...
Through the chair, please, Ms McNair.
...how your party are treating our most vulnerable in Scotland and the wider UK. But instead, as I say, Labour plan to proceed with those on essential social security benefits as an easy target. And we should not be surprised by this. Dr David Webster of the University of Glasgow has pointed out that under the last Labour government, benefit sanctions rose to some of the highest levels. But the stigmatisation of those in benefits has terrible consequences for individuals and for a fair society where no one should be left behind. In the report, Jumping Through Hoops, Independent Age quotes Susan, who said her experience of claiming UK benefits had the effect of reducing me to tears and even making me feel suicidal several times. Not only were the questions difficult to understand, dwelling on all the things that I am no longer capable of doing sent me into a very dark place. Presiding Officer, this isn't someone looking for a handout. This isn't someone gaming the system, and it isn't someone taking the mickey. But for an easy political hit, Labour plan to adopt austerity on stilts instead of dignity, fairness and respect. They will hurt real people in my constituency and across Scotland. Under their plans, disabled people will be seriously impacted, and it will increase financial insecurity for vulnerable households. To put that into figures, there are reports that by 2029, over 450,000 disabled people and people with long-term conditions across the UK could be impacted as a result of the proposed reforms to work capability assessment, with many losing payments currently worth over £400 per month. And only yesterday, the BBC reported that the Chancellor had earmarked several £billion in draft spending cuts to welfare. In a 2024 report from Poverty Line Scotland for the collaborative project with the Scottish Government to assess the impact of poverty-related stigma on benefit take-up, it was found that, most panellists agreed that stigma has gotten worse with austerity. I have already said I'm not taking your intervention. UK Government welfare reform and the cost of living crises. And several spoke of putting off claiming it for as long as they possibly could, to the point of hunger and destitution, which is really concerning, and we've heard that so many times within our Social Justice Committee. It's up to us to combat the stigma, to change the narrative around benefits. Benefits are a safety net and they are normal, but Labour are promoting a narrative of scrounger and undeserving. And I'll say again, Please be mindful about the use of language that we are using. By contrast, Scotland's social security system is based on fairness, dignity and respect. The Poverty Alliance report highlighted the different approaches in Scotland. Dealing with Social Security Scotland was viewed as a far less stigmatising experience than the DWP. The difference was noted as night and day. And we will continue to go further to protect our constituents who require benefits. And that is clear from the budget for 2025-26, which will invest £6.9 billion in social security, expected to support around £2 million in 2025-26. But we will continue to do everything we can to protect those in need, we are continuously hindered by UK austerity measures. The austerity policies of 2010, put in place by our Tory and Lib colleagues, have led to severe suffering for the Scottish community, particularly those on low incomes. And it has been described by economists and economic historians as disastrous and reckless. And the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty in 2023 went even further, condemning the UK Government's shameful record on poverty, saying the UK's grossly insignificant welfare system after a decade of austerity is simply not acceptable and may be in violation of international law. These reckless policies have resulted in the Scottish Government spending a large portion of the budget counteracting the damaging policies to protect the Scottish people. In 2025, the Scottish Government is set to invest up to £210 million in measures to mitigate UK Government austerity policies, such as the so-called bedroom tax, benefit cap and the cut to winter fuel payment. And we will go further by scrapping Labour's abhorrent two-child cap, and this will lift approximately 15,000 children out of poverty. The Scottish Government's social security policies are significant, and they are the reason why Scotland is the only part of the UK where child poverty rates are predicted to fall. In the SNP, Scottish Government will continue to value and protect benefit claimants. But only with full control over welfare policies will we be able to truly address poverty and inequality. Therefore, I am calling on my Labour colleagues here today. Push your UK Government to take the right approach and reverse their punitive welfare reform plans. If not, at least call it out and support the full devolution of social security and employment policy. It is only then we will have a fair and compassionate welfare system that leaves no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to the open debate. I call for Stephen Kerr to be followed by Paul O'Kane. Around 4 minutes. Mr Kerr.
Well, Mary McNair, congratulations on the debate, but really that speech is something else. To quote the UN rapporteur, in relation to UK welfare, we spent £350 billion this year on welfare in this country, and it's about time we had an honest debate about this, about welfare. And the reality is that, and we should be honest, the reality is we have too many people in this country who are able to work, but who have chosen not to engage in employment. And this is not just an economic crisis, this is a moral one. And that's the reason why I wanted to speak in this debate, because I believe firmly in the ennobling and fulfilling importance of good work. The welfare system was intended to be a safety net. I think we agree on that. Not a lifestyle choice. It should support people back into employment and not trap them in dependency. Yes.
Emma Roddick.
On the point of morality, does the member acknowledge that disability benefits are not all out-of-work benefits? And does he realise the impact that cutting those welfare payments to disabled people would have on their ability to stay in work and to feed and clothe themselves?
Stephen Kerr.
And the system should be geared around helping people stay in work, helping people have as much self-reliance and independence as possible. But we shouldn't be designing systems that trap people in dependency. Now, according to the Office for Budget Responsibility, UK welfare spending is, as I already mentioned, this year £350 billion, is spiralling unsustainably, reaching levels that even a Labour government has acknowledged cannot continue. In 2025-26, the Scottish Government intends to spend £1.3 billion more than the UK block grant adjustment on social security, with further increases anticipated. And despite repeated requests, notably from the Public Finance Committee, the government has yet to outline a sustainable long-term funding plan. Maybe the Minister is going to conjure one out of her speech at the end of this debate. And the SNP's proposal to remove the two-child benefit cap would add at least another £200 million a year just to start with. And none of this expenditure has been properly accounted for. The welfare system we have created is not financially sustainable, and there's no point in pretending otherwise. And I welcome the acceptance across the parties that we need to reduce the number of people dependent on welfare. A successful government sets goals to cut the number of people on welfare, not increase it. The SNP's approach is not compassionate. It is cruel, because it is designed to keep people stuck where they are instead of helping people move forward. We need to rebalance our economy. Alongside the welfare crisis, we have too many people working for the government, while the private sector, our best source of new jobs, struggles. If we must extend the tax base by making more people self-reliant, as they would desire to be, and less dependent on the state. We should be investing in skills, in training, in apprenticeships. Yet under the SNP we see the opposite: cuts to further education, an artificial cap on apprenticeships, and a lack of investment in upskilling. This is a failure of ambition for Scotland. What a strange nationalist party we have in government in Scotland, to lack such ambition for our people. And we must also be mindful of working people who should not be left feeling that their hard-earned money is being used to fund people who are capable of working, but who are choosing not to. We need to create the conditions for the creation of good work. Work must always pay. We must help people feel they have an opportunity to upskill, to make choices for themselves, to increase their capability to earn and provide for their families. Instead of being penalised by punitive taxes, they should be encouraged to work and have ambition. Aspirations should be rewarded, Presiding Officer, not punished. And we need a government who believe in work, who believe in self-reliance, and who believe in growth.
Thank you. I now call Paul O'Kane to be followed by Stuart McMillan again. Around 4 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. I want to try and be generous to Miriam McNair, but in doing so, I think I would describe the motion and the debate before us today as unserious. And the reason I say that is because we are having a debate around a motion which is seeking to discuss proposed reforms to UK social security payments which have not, in fact, been announced, and the detail of which none of us have seen, and have appeared publicly in the press as, I think, what the Cabinet Secretary referred to this morning in committee as, and I quote, rumours. So I do think it's important that we look at the context where we are right now. Obviously, there will be... Yes?
Stephen Kerr.
I'm grateful, because to be fair to Miriam McNair and to the motion before us, is it not the intention of this Labour government to cut the welfare bill by helping people back into work? Is that not the intention of this Labour government?
Paul O'Kane, I give you the time back.
Well, I think I've just said that there are reforms which have not yet been consulted on. So I think it's the intention of this Labour government to ensure that people who want to work can access work and are supported to do so. And I'll come on to say more about that in my speech. So I think it's important to deal in fact of what 7 months of a UK Labour government have meant for these issues. Because there's no mention in the motion to the changes that have been made, for example, to the fair repayment rate on debt, which means that 110,000 Scottish households will be on average £420 better off a year because of our universal credit reforms. There's no mention of the changes to the earnings threshold for carers' allowance to allow unpaid carers to earn more whilst keeping their entitlements. That is the biggest change to carers' allowance since 1974, a move which the Scottish Government took weeks to confirm they would follow. And there is no mention of changes announced just this week to statutory sick pay, which mean that 1.3 million of the lowest paid Britons can access sick pay from day one, so they don't have to choose between their health and earning a living. And that goes along alongside the Employment Rights Bill, which I will speak about in my contribution. And similarly, I think if you read the motion and you listened to certainly the opening speech, you would think that Social Security Scotland is completely flawless in this space. But we do know that the rollout of adult disability payment and child disability payment have seen significantly higher processing times than their DWP equivalents. And we know that almost 100 people have tragically died in 2023 alone whilst waiting for ADP applications to be approved. There's been over £1 million of overpayments which will not be recovered, creating an unnecessary fiscal pressure. And there have been significant issues setting up the agency, with a £39 million spend on IT systems and a low staff occupancy rate at its Dundee headquarters, with annual running costs of £1.5 million. And as highlighted in the motion, there is an ever-rising spend above block grant adjustment, and that does put pressure on tax receipt in Scotland and other spending portfolios. And at Social Justice Committee this morning, I think even the Cabinet Secretary acknowledged, perhaps for the first time, that there is a pressure on the budget, and to quote her, the implications are stark. And I want to be clear, those are legitimate decisions that are taken in this Parliament, and my party, as founder party of this Parliament, if you like, support the principle and devolution of making decisions. But we cannot escape the fact that we're going to have a debate and a discussion about how we pay for those things. And I think that's why I call the debate unserious, because we are not having that debate and it's not present within the motion. We have to have an open and honest discussion about both the purpose of social security, but also how we can ensure that people get the right support to get into work and to get into true and meaningful positive destinations. And I'm happy to try and interject some nuance into the debate today by saying that I think the positive steps that I've outlined that the Labour Government have taken so far must be coupled with further reform and further work. And I think that's why the reform of universal credit is so important, and the review that's ongoing from the UK Government, but also that any changes that are made, particularly to those in receipt of sickness benefit or people who are disabled, are geared towards an investment in ensuring that people can be supported to work. And just this morning, the Department of Work and Pensions and the Secretary of State has announced, for example, 1,000 extra job coaches to go into the job centre network in order to support people to get into work. Those are the sorts of interventions that I think are going to be crucially important. And I'm happy to acknowledge many of the challenges that exist across the variety of issues that contribute to poverty in our country. But I do think we have to have a serious, grown-up and nuanced debate in terms of how we tackle all of those facets, using both the social security system and access to work. But it's clear to me that members of the government benches have no intention of doing that today. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Stuart McMillan to be followed by Maggie Chapman. Around 4 minutes. Mr McMillan.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First, I want to thank Marie McNair for securing this important debate, emphasising the detrimental impact of the UK welfare system on society's most vulnerable. I just want to touch upon a couple of comments from Stephen Kerr at the very outset. Stephen Kerr used the words compassionate and cruel. He also spoke about the cutting of apprenticeships and the lack of upskilling, and also highlighted that work must always pay. I think back to 1979 when his party took control in Westminster, and how many communities, including my own in Inverclyde, were absolutely decimated because it was a cruel approach that was taking place. The apprenticeships were culled, and there was certainly a lack of upskilling because the introduction, about 2 seconds, because the introduction of the YTS scheme to replace apprenticeships did not upskill.
Stephen Kerr, briefly.
Stuart McMillan deflects from my comments by referring to events that were 44 years ago. No, actually, 46 years ago. Stuart McMillan surely must reflect on the fact that this is desperation on his part to reach back so far to deflect from the valid criticisms that are being made by many outside of this chamber about his government's lack of commitment to skills training and further education.
Stuart McMillan.
I'm sorry, Mr Kerr, but the fact that my community has still not fully recovered from the decimation, Mr Kerr, it has not fully recovered.
Through the chair, Mr McMillan, and Mr Kerr, please.
Mr Kerr, my community has not fully recovered because of the decisions taken by Mr Kerr's party in 1979. Not only my community, but the community of Marie McNair's and others in this Parliament. So the existing policy positions under consecutive Westminster governments is the polar opposite as to how benefit support should work, to lift people up when they need a helping hand, not make life harder for them. I'm therefore pleased that in Scotland we have taken a different approach to the Social Security in Scotland, and I recognise the comments from Paula Kane. There are some challenges there which clearly have to be worked upon. But the aspect of dignity, fairness and respect is at the heart of the organisation. An example of this is the Scottish Child Payment, which is unique to Scotland. Currently, the payment is worth £26.70 per week per eligible child. But following the passing of the budget last week, it will increase to £27.15 per week from the 1st of April. In my Greenock and Inverclyde constituency, since the Scottish Child Payment was established in 2021, over £17 million has been paid out to local families, helping them, assisting them. That's benefited 5,360 children as of December last year, demonstrating this SNP government's commitment to putting more money into people's pockets. This is very much in stark contrast to the DWP and how that operates, who seem tasked with finding any reason to deduct money from people's benefit awards. I'm going to touch upon some elements of a case that my office has been dealing with. I'm sorry, Mr O'Kane, I'm now short of time. I'm clearly not going to reveal the constituent's name or much of their case, but the individual approached me for support due to rent arrears debts. There were numerous personal circumstances that led to my constituent falling behind on the rent, many of which were out with their personal control. But they had agreed to a repayment plan with the DWP, and then the DWP penalised my constituent for missing an appointment. Once again, that was out with their control. The penalty? No universal credit payments for 80 days. I'm not going to get into all the details, as I said, my constituent does accept that they have made some mistakes along the way. But I fail to see how this achieves anything other than making people feel more vulnerable. And for my constituent, it almost resulted in eviction, and at which point other services had to step in to provide support. Now, I firmly believe that the DWP if they had employed a more caring and person-centred approach, they might have identified the acute challenges that my constituent was facing, instead of the modus operandi to treat people with suspicion rather than view them as a human being in need of help. Now, whether colleagues, I'd imagine across the chamber will have some similar circumstances from the DWP, I would imagine, but whether they consider it a horror story, of course, depends on their point of view. But for me, it's abundantly clear that the UK welfare system is not fit for purpose. And I echo the comments from Mary McNair to actually get all of those devolved to this Parliament. So, for Labour to come into power and adopt the Tories' cruel and callous so-called welfare reforms, and in some cases perpetuate them further, in my consideration, is very much an utter betrayal. And once again, I thank Mary McNair for bringing this debate to the Chamber.
Thank you. And I call the final speaker in the open debate, Maggie Chapman, who joins us remotely, around 4 minutes. Ms Chapman.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I thank Mary McNair for securing this important debate. This motion reflects an alarm which I believe is shared by a great many members of this Parliament, though all may not be able to express it. The continuation of Tory policies by a Labour government isn't, of course, new. But the speed and scale with which Sir Keir has sloughed off his former principles is both breathtaking and terrifying. Perhaps, though, that's the idea. Move fast and break things. Isn't that the mantra of the Brutocracy? And if the things that are broken are the welfare state, the social security system, the social contract of which the motion speaks, is that really a price worth paying for the illusion of growth, any growth, benign or malignant? Marie McNair is right to identify these policies as those of austerity, whether or not they use that word. And, like those of the last UK government, they have, or threaten to have, a threefold impact on Scotland. First, they impose direct harm on individuals, families and communities, the harms of poverty, anxiety, exclusion and stigma. Many of our constituents know those harms intimately. They are their constant companions through days of desperation, through nights of sleepless fear. Second, by the nature of the so-called devolution settlement, they make the creation of alternatives so much more difficult. Financial and constitutional barriers corral us into doing what Westminster does, however much our instincts rebel. And third, most perniciously, The ideology of austerity makes alternatives hard to express, hard even to imagine. It is an ideology of punishment, not for what people do, but for what they are, for their bodies, their homes, their failure to get themselves born into greater comfort. The only release is through what is called striving, not for a better future, but a fuller bank account, not for the common good, but the private, to build walls that keep the world outside. And so our shared responses, I believe, must confront all three of these impacts. First, we must continue to extend and deepen our work of creative mitigation, finding ways, even within our current confines, that can protect those most in need and prevent the greatest harms. And I am grateful that we are able to do, in some ways, some limited ways, some of this work in Scotland. Second, we must not lose sight of the horizon of our progress towards greater agency. For most of us speaking here this afternoon, that horizon means Scottish independence, the freedom to shape a future that more closely embodies our values. And third, urgently, we must articulate those values. Vulnerability is not a defect to be cured by bullying and deprivation. It is a universal human condition, only masked by a privileged few for a few years of pretended autonomy. We depend upon one another. We depend upon the earth. We depend upon care, compassion and creativity, upon sustainability and solidarity. These are our sources of growth, of roots as well as fruit and flowers. We can and should be proud to speak of them. Finally, Presiding Officer, this motion today that we debate is about welfare cuts, but it could have been about immigration policy. It could have been about Gaza. It could have been about the plan to ravage UK aid commitments to fatten the defence budget, shamelessly turning ploughshares into swords. In each of these situations, the same pattern appears, the same betrayal of those with least, the same refusal to acknowledge our shared vulnerability. For it is only together that we are resilient, together that we are human. We can and should do so much more to express that humanity for everyone.
Thank you. I now call on Kokab Stewart to respond to the debate. Minister, around 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I just thank Marie McNair for bringing forward this debate, and I have listened very carefully to the comments and I hope to respond to some of the points that were raised. Presiding Officer, any one of us might find ourselves at any time in our lives unable to get paid work due to sickness or disability, and because we are caring for a loved one. And if that happens, Social Security should provide us with a safety net. Protection from poverty and financial insecurity, no matter what life has thrown at us. That is what Social Security should be. What we are seeing from the current UK government ahead of publication later this month of their Green Paper raises significant concerns for the future of that social security safety net. When the previous UK government initially set out proposals for changes to the work capability assessment, this government, along with poverty campaigners and disabled people's organisations, roundly condemned the targeting of vital benefits supporting disabled people and those with long-term health conditions. And it is deeply disappointing to see the current UK government continuing with these plans. Now, I know within reference to Paul O'Kane's intervention, it is a very uncomfortable space for Labour, that although these reforms originated with the previous Conservative government, Labour have defended it. And in fact, at the judicial review, it was found that the consultation on the reforms was based on the need to save money as opposed to getting people back into jobs. And they are now reconsulting, and we will see the results of that reconsult in the Green Paper that is meant to be forthcoming. As Marie McNair points out in her motion, the UK Government's language when discussing disabled people or people with long-term health conditions is deeply concerning, as it seeks to further stigmatise and blame the sick and disabled for accessing social security benefits, which they are legally entitled to and upon which they rely. But we know that there is a different way to deliver social security in Scotland, as Maggie Chapman pointed out, that in this space, as a devolved nation, we're able to do that. And this chamber unanimously passed the Social Security Scotland Act in 2018, an act which enshrines the principles of dignity, fairness and respect, reducing poverty and advancing equality and non-discrimination at the heart of a radically different social security system, which Stuart Macmillan so eloquently pointed out, that we must retain compassion at the heart of any social security system. And these are the principles that guide this government's social security decision-making. So, whilst the UK Government is focused on reducing the amount of money spent on supporting the disabled and others who need help, this Scottish Government believes that social security is an essential collective investment in Scotland's people, its communities and its future. An investment because, as we all know, inequality is bad for our health, it is bad for our communities and bad for our economy. In the recently passed budget, this Scottish Government made a conscious decision to invest in social security for the people in Scotland by investing around £6.9 billion in benefits and payments for the years 25 to 26. This investment will support around 2 million people, which is around £1.3 billion more than the funding received from the UK Government for social security. So here in Scotland, we are taking a positive and compassionate approach to delivering the adult disability payment. This approach is ensuring that more disabled people get the support that they are entitled to, whilst making sure accessing this support is as straightforward as possible. In 25-26, we will invest around £3.6 billion in adult disability payment. This is £314 million more than we are forecast to receive from the UK Government through the Social Security Block Grant Adjustment. We are also using our limited budget to mitigate some of the most damaging policies of the UK Government. Over the past 14 years, we have spent around £1.2 billion mitigating policies such as the bedroom tax and the benefit cap, including almost £154 million this year in 24-25. Furthermore, we will mitigate the pernicious two-child cap from 2026, helping to keep thousands of children out of poverty and reducing the depth of poverty faced for many more. I will take that intervention.
Stephen Kerr.
I'm grateful to the Minister for giving way. She mentions the numbers in the 25-26 budget, the £1.3 billion that's being spent more than is allocated through the block grant. Would she share with the Chamber exactly how the Government planned to fund the exponential increases that they're planning in spending in this area? And would she also accept that the Government perhaps should also set its sights on creating jobs and helping people that are currently on benefits move into work? Because that never seems to be part of anything that ministers say in this place when it comes to the welfare system. Because the whole point of the welfare system, for many people, if not most, is to help them temporarily while they get back into good work. Why does the Government never talk about that? So sustainability of budgeting and work. What's the Minister's response?
Minister, I can give you the time back.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, for giving me the time back to Mr Kerr's very lengthy intervention there. I do not accept that case that this Government does not support people going into work. We have a raft of investment ways to do that. This debate is uncomfortable for both the Tories and Labour because their approach to welfare benefits is based on punishment and stigma, and this Government rejects that wholeheartedly. So So, despite the fixed budgets and limited powers of devolution, we have transformed social security provision in Scotland, and we are on course, committed to ensuring that finances remain on a sustainable trajectory. We will publish our next medium-term financial strategy later this year, alongside a fiscal sustainability delivery plan. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, as I and many in this chamber have already highlighted, the recent statements by the UK Government ministers on welfare reform and benefit cuts show no regard for the reality of people's lives. So I'm going to close this debate with a clear and urgent message to the UK Government. Remember your pledge of no austerity. Do not punish those who most need our help. Recognise the hardships which require people who need help from the benefit system, and join us in the Scottish Government to working to banish stigma from social security rather than amplifying it through aggressive soundbites and rhetoric. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes the debate. I suspend this meeting of Parliament until 2:30.